something for the committee to put on their radar. Insurance.
What about it?
School needs some.
It's Joe Russo.
Danny Pudi.
Joel McHale.
Dan Harmon.
Chris McKenna.
For
Matt
those of
Roller.
you just tuning in.
Yeah, trivia. We're starting this for the second time. I was so drunk, I started describing hot lava because I saw Joe Russo walk in, and I was like, "Oh, we're doing hot lava."
Well, and you got 10 seconds in.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Banks got tan in this episode.
Did he?
Yeah.
You will hear me in other commentaries saying that the second Dungeons and Dragons episode is the reason why the last couple of episodes of Communities season 5 are like, I don't, if you had any problems with them, that's why. It doesn't mean that this episode is bad. It means that it took a really fucking long time to write, and it threw off the whole schedule. And it was hubris that made me think, let's do another one.
It was worth it because I love it.
There it is. There's the fence.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go.
Guarding against that, we brought in the great Joe Russo, who did the first one, who took a micro crane into this room and doing the first one and did an art form out of a bottle episode with a story. So Joe came on board and said, well, let's not do that again. And I think we were all on the same page. Let's try to do something different. In D&D terms, we wanted to make it more epic. We wanted to make it more like Lord of the Rings. So we put it in Ovid's apartment, and Joe, just out of practicality as well as style, like you used different cameras. It was more handheld, and you were kind of moving through the room, and you want to talk about
Yeah, it's more limited space, obviously, in the study room, which is basically like a mini soundstage. And there's a lot of room to move in that study room around the table.
Was there any limited space in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, that you just directed and broke the record for largest opening in the history of April? Anyway,
limited space in the third act of that film.
There's only so many flying aircraft carriers that
you can blow up and can crash into Washington, D.C.
I just want to point out that the population of the Earth keeps getting bigger, so all of these world record box office things, it's just more people watching movies.
Unless there's a natural disaster that wipes out.
But until
then... What are you
then...
saying, Joel? What are you saying?
I'm just saying that if somebody happens to release a 12 monkeys-like airborne virus that silences all of civilization,
it
then
could
Captain
humble
America,
the Russo brothers.
Captain America, the Winter Soldier, will be the most popular movie in the history of April.
You're talking about the plot for Cap 3. How do you know?
Shit.
I hate it when you call him Cap. Like, you're just rubbing it in our face.
Yeah, Cap 3.
Yeah.
So Cap and I
was just hanging out with
Cap. We get it.
You call Chris Evans CE or anything like that?
But Joe has a bunch of like really cool directory things that he says on set that makes you always go like, huh. Like when you're like, oh, when you give up to a director, when you go up to an actor, you're like, oh, can you do this a little better and bigger and then all Joe says is like, hey, can you put a little bit of mustard on that? That fucking guy is so much. He's always doing that thing. Squirting mustard on actors.
Ironically, he's spouting off all that directory stuff while resting a laptop on his stomach and doing fantasy football. Yeah, again, guys. Yeah, again, yeah. I'm going to pull in a vet here and just say let's acknowledge the incredible David Cross.
Yes.
And I'd also like to honorable mention for Danny Pudi, whose memorization skills in this thing were astounding.
I want to pull in a vet by thanking Spencer, your assistant, Dan, because he was my guide this whole week with giving me all kinds of tips on how to use language, the cards, and everything. And
you were having serious asides with him where you were like, okay, what die should I roll?
Yeah, it was.
Spencer was there, like a young Steven Seagal advising,
Spencer is Dan's assistant, who's also a dungeon master. For those of you who are listening who don't know that. Oh wait, no, none of you don't know that.
I have to go. I'll come right back. I'll be back in about 10 minutes.
See you later, Joe McHale.
Sorry, I'm really not leaving.
It's so weird that I'm doing a phone call now with Joel, a conference call, but I'm still staying.
So I don't know. I mean, did this one
hubris, right? Hubris.
I knew.
Dan said at Comic-Con, you know what? And he announced it.
Yeah.
I did never learn before.
Yeah, of
not
course.
to announce something at Comic-Con. We're doing a D&D 2.
It was a dumb choice, but we're all going to be grateful for it in the long run. I mean, it's I don't know, it's fucking cool, but I just wonder, I know that comparisons to the first one are going to be inevitable, and we I think, Joe, that was your instinct as well as mine, was like, that's why we got to get out of the study room, because so that we can help people look at it as two different things.
Right. In some way, try to. The thing about Dungeons and Dragons is it's always going to be a group of people sitting around talking, right? So the limit, it's limited in its, in your execution of it, right? You have to get inventive with the camera work, which is what we discovered on the first episode. Was if they're going to be locked in this room, how do we bring a sense of scale to it? Well, we can do it through the sound work. And this is a very organic process we went through. We were talking about, well, if we use the sound to motivate camera, and then, what if we get the crane out, and we can open the room up by using dynamic camera work.
Right.
So you're always to some extent going to be stuck with that because ultimately it is just a group of people sitting around talking. So if you want to bring the story to life, you've got to do it by using sound and camera and acting.
And the crazy thing about the first one is that you weren't supposed to direct it. Adam Davidson was until his wife went into labor
at
the night
Sunday
before,
night.
Yeah,
That's
Sunday
right.
night before the Monday shoot.
That's right.
And you came in and were the cranes already set it for that one, or were you like, oh no, let's figure this out? Do you remember?
We figured it out as we went, but I had done some prep for him because his wife was having complications near the end, maybe, or there's something where he wasn't available that much. I remember prepping things like the Neil reveal with the kids taunting him in the background, where we did the light shift.
Right.
And things like that were prepped, but I was pitching him ideas about what I thought he could do with the execution of it. So at least I had those in my head when, I got the call at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night. But still, it was a function that was a very organic process it was conversations back and forth about what are we going to do here? And I think it was your idea, Dan, where you're talking about using sound to motivate. And I started going, oh yeah, what if then what if the dragon, we use the camera as the point of view of the dragon at one point. And it really just became an organic process.
And you had already shot the legendary bottle episode that year, which was all very like in the moment, documentarian, if you want to, if you will. So this was going to be much more stylistic in terms of doing a bottle episode, essentially, but keeping it contained within the
We
room.
had a template for bottle episodes. We had executed that in a very specific way. You don't want to go back to the well because you're going to bore people. So, and also our inspiration for it was Lord of the Rings, right? We were spoofing the opening of Lord of the Rings. We had a couple of nods to Lord of the Rings. There's very specific camera work in those films. It's a lot of moving crane work and moving masters and things like that.
I think we kind of thought, whether it was spoken or not, that it was like the first D&D episode, if that was The Hobbit, in terms of the Ralph Bakshi kind of the actual original, like or the Tolkien books, like. The Hobbit is a very charming, contained thing, and if you get into a scuffle with a knife, it's a big deal. And then Lord of the Rings is longer and bigger, and you're cutting back and forth between like multiple people, and they've been split up, and what's going to happen, and the state of the world is. It's like that was the attempt, I think, with the sequel. Is like, let's do Lord of the Rings to The Hobbit. That was the first one.
And I think one of the things that we went away from in the original Breaking, Matt, I don't know if you remember, but like I remember like. It's one of the things I've learned over the years with Dan. If he has an idea that suddenly just sort of comes out of his brain and then you go away from, you will often find yourself going back to it. And I remember you threw out this idea early on when we were breaking it, which is like, I just want to see like these two, if we're breaking the story around this son and this father story, this Hickey character that we've fallen in love with very early on. And you were like, I see a war between like these two guys. They build armies and they fight each other, and then we went away from that for a while, and I think obviously we went back to that, and it seemed like one of those things that was more in keeping with the epic element of the sequel to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, in terms of the fight, whatever, like the battles between armies, and we went back to that, right? I mean, Matt, you describe your experience.
Here's Matt Roller, the poor kid that got that graduated Harvard only to be saddled with the psychosis.
That was the progression, yeah. I mean, I remember for a long time we were really tied to the idea of we can't break up Hickey and his son. Like, that's what this episode is about. We need to see them fighting. And that was a huge transition for, what if they go down separate paths of this river? We had like 5 versions of this. Do you remember when in the middle of the night it became a ship. They started out on
Oh
a
yeah,
ship.
absolutely.
Actually,
Because we're like,
yeah,
how do
that
we
was,
start off this thing in a way that we haven't done it before? And then we fell in love with the idea that they're all on a ship and they get attacked by a sea
unconvinced
creature.
that wouldn't have been better, that they were on a ship.
It's a big
but-
set piece.
Yeah, and it was like they get they get attacked in the opening by a serpent, and that's what like tosses them aside.
It's one of my favorite
Times
jokes ever.
Times Square.
Times Square.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll spend the rest of my life wondering whether or not I did a good thing or a bad thing by insisting that we do another one of these. But I do know that
I feel like the sea serpent thing was it's cosmetic, and the thing was I think this is a culmination of us falling in love with this new character that we had in the group, which was Buzz Hickey, and we had broken so many stories around this character. I think even to the point before we even knew that Jonathan Banks was going to be in the role, that we just wanted like, how do we explore this? And then we were suddenly exploring his family, and I think it was just all organic in terms of our love for this character. And Joe, you had already done you had done one of the first episodes with Hickey, and then later on in the season you did this. So I don't know, describe that experience in terms of, because you brought your knowledge of like, oh, really the Hickey element into this episode.
Well, that's the key with these episodes. Again, the stakes in the game, are only real if there are stakes amongst the characters, right? Which is the crux we're dealing with in the first episode, which was activated by, Neil's suicide, and similarly in this one, you needed stakes, which were, how can we take Banks and find something emotional that could be at stake with him, that could fuel the game.
Right.
And a lot of times with Community, I mean, it's always about serendipity. And Cross was a fan of the show, and he'd been asking to do the show for a long time. And I think, things just kind of line up in a way where interesting ideas or end up getting tabled, but until they're ready. Until they're needed in a moment, and then put into it. So, I think there's a great. To me, my favorite part of the episode is Cross's relationship with Banks. I like when Cross is dramatic, and when he has like a real intensity to him and a bite to him, because he can play mean as good as anybody, and I enjoy that component to his character. Or to him as an actor. So I think he added a real dimension to this. You can look back on it, Dan, forever and say, should you have done it or should you not have done it? The one value I know that comes out of it is that the show ultimately was always about ambition,
Right.
creativity, and trying things, right? So there's nobility in the attempt, no matter what, right?
Yeah, because what in a world where we know that Community's not going to go from a 0.9 rating to a 1-point rating or whatever, except by random activity, what is the value in nailing Community in the same way that a railroad master nails a railroad? Little trains are running on time. Like we've fallen into a role with the show, where the show's job is to be. Is to be the little girl from the Blind Melon video, tap dancing in a bee outfit, like just constantly going out there, putting itself out there. And so sometimes that takes the form of things that make a really hardcore fan go, no, but this isn't what I fucking wanted. Like, I've been watching this thing forever, and I could feel it. And I know what I would have made the next episode be, and I'm nuts. Like, I can't stop thinking about that stuff. Anyways,
I will say to that though, that like you said, the Cross Hickey relationship. I mean, Jonathan Banks and David Cross, like being father and son. I'm sorry, like
feels great.
It's so fantastic to me, and gives it such emotional weight, and but also. This guy, fucking Jim Rash, who was not originally, when we were breaking it, part of the story.
I came back a few times. Like, there'd be times where I'd leave for an hour and I'd come back and he wouldn't be in the story. I'd be, no,
yeah,
please.
no, I remember. It was just like, his inclusion in this is it's whipped cream and cherries on this episode, because he's, to me, the funniest part. Like, he just gives...
Right, and irrespective of the conversation about whether we should or shouldn't have, Jim Rash has probably 3 of the funniest laughs of the season in the episode.
And in television history, if I may be so bold, one of which being the yet to come.
Oh yeah, the Blade.
The Blade thing. Which that's the thing about Jim Rash is like he's, with all due respect to every actor on the show, like, and they're fucking amazing, and one of them sitting next to me. But like Jim Rash has that writer DNA in him too, and the writers sometimes have these laughing fits about things that we then send to the set, and then we go like, well, you make a paper airplane, you throw it, it tends to go down, it doesn't tend to go up, and then Jim like sees in the script that it says that he impales himself on an imaginary sword, and it comes back higher than the writers were laughing at. You know, this idea, like we didn't think it was as funny as when Jim gets done with it.
Because I really feel like Danny is what keeps this episode from spinning away from us. Because Danny is like the dungeon master, and he's our guide and our route into all of this, and that allows.
But I just finished saying Jim is our favorite. he's the
No, this is my backhanded compliment to Danny, saying, "Oh yeah, you're the glue, buddy. You're great." No,
My favorite is Ken Jeong. Joe having to move Ken Jeong off the bed for numerous takes of David Cross because Ken is chuckling the entire time about staring at David Cross.
No, all Ken did all season long was just like, "Oh, I love you, Mitch Hurwitz.
Yeah.
I love you, Dave Cross. I love everyone who's like a day player."
Yeah.
And it's not like him. It's just like, oh, he just loves that they're bringing their A game to the show.
But that was actually a great thing about this episode too, though, is that there are so many people involved compared to the first D&D, and with Jim Rash and with Ken Jeong, it did make it more fun with everyone around.
It's funny. We had at one point, and we had said, "Oh yeah," and we wanted Jim to be wearing a little Peter Pan hat. He had shown up with a Peter Pan hat to this like little like, "Oh, let's put on a D&D game." I think I might have tipped it over. I think a little bit. I kind of now just love him and his little Oxford that is like
It's progressively
drawn
getting-
into it rather than showing up with his own little costume.
This is, if Joaquin Phoenix could pull this off for dramatic purposes, he would.
There's like 15 of these too, somewhere.
Worth it. And the hawk scream there is so perfect. The death.
Special props to Jeff Hall, who started as a editor's assistant on, I don't know, season I can't remember when he came up. I think it was for the Pillows and Blankets episode, the Ken Burns homage. Jeff Hall went from editor's assistant to editor, and he's had some of the most difficult community episodes to deal
Remedial
with,
Chaos.
including this one. Oh, Remedial Chaos, yeah.
It might have been his first.
So Jeff Hall is the one that's putting, he we have a glass of scotch and we walk out of the edit bay and say, just come on, make it more of a battle. He's got all this footage to deal with.
So Riggs, hand in your character sheet.
A fun behind-the-scenes thing here is that when the first act was being shot, no one knew what the third act was going to be yet.
Yeah, you can actually see there's a featurette on the DVD that you're probably watching.
There you go.
You can actually see the moment when it's Alex Rubens. Not that he's some kind of smarty pants. We were having this conversation about what the third act is. And you see Alex Rubin say, it seems like the conversation we're trying to have is that we're trying to solve fathers and sons. And it seems like the point of fathers and sons is that you can't solve them. And that's how this episode ends, is that Joel's character, who knows better than anyone that it's too powerful, this hearth, it glows too strongly. It's not about, you don't get to say, oh, this father-son relationship doesn't suit my purposes because it's not warm and cuddly. It's like, do you want a father or not? Because a lot of people don't have them. And then I was like, if you've got one, it can be prickly and it can be weird.
And then Rubens made a Keegan-Michael Key kind of face, and we were like, okay, well,
Too much.
It was a big epiphany.
Yourself.
This idea of Jeff closing the door quietly on a father and son playing D&D together. It makes me misty when I see it. I don't know if it's a hilarious sitcom, but I am really proud of this. Like, as with every episode of Community, like I'm really proud of the fact that the worst Community episodes are only their only failing is that they're maybe not necessarily the perfect episode of a sitcom on Thursday night on NBC, but that they actually, by virtue of that, they're like, holy shit, this is a fantastic 20-minute short film.
And you know what? I will say that we wrote for the table, like, we did an all-nighter and we turned this in like every episode, and it had a very kind of rushed resolution to it that Jonathan Banks was like, fuck that, I'm not hugging my son.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
That's true, yeah. Jonathan Banks' crotchety, kind of, high-maintenance, actory bullshit. Like, actually, that's an example of it being like, you know what, he's right. And Sony agreed with him, too.
Yeah.
This fucking pat resolution of they hug each other. We went back to the drawing board because Jonathan Banks and Sony and everybody were like, you know what, we're not buying it. There was like this hug it out kind of ending, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And you should give credit where it's due. Some of the people that are barking over your shoulder, like they can bark truth randomly too.
Well, it's funny. I will say about Jonathan, he felt very passionate about a lot of things, particularly about father and son elements in the show. He has his own, sons, and has a lot of very strong opinions about how they resolve their.
He has had a lot of stuff. You can see that he's like Gillian Jacobs, fantastic dramatic actor. If he can understand why he's in a scene and what his character's doing, you can't get anybody better.
Yes.
To carry feelings across.
Right.